Good morning, and thank you all for joining me and filling up the room nicely. It's good to see some familiar faces in here. We got a Dutch crowd up front. I saw Barry from the Dublin Jug come in, Roy from NL and my good friend Matt is here. And Matt had the courage to wear the most awesome outfit of the entire conference. So can you show him, Matt?
My hammer pants.
All right, let's give a round of applause to Matt. All right. So I'm going to start with a question for you. A question you probably might not be expecting, but how many of you likes karaoke? Don't worry, I'm not going to make you sing. Any of you into karaoke? Okay, almost nobody. So I went to a karaoke bar the other day for the first time in my life. It was fun, but it did take its toll on my voice a little, so hopefully I won't bother you too much with it. So welcome to Angular for Java developers. My name is Bert Schrijver. I'm from the Netherlands. I work at OpenValue and at JPoint. I'm currently doing an assignment at the Dutch police, where I learn everything about Angular. And I also run the NL Jug, the Netherlands Java Use Group. Any members in here of the NL Jug? All right, a couple. Welcome. So for the next 45 minutes or so, we're going to start with an introduction into Angular. I'll tell you all about Angular and why I like it. There'll be some live coding, some demoing, some more live coding, some more demo, some more live coding, and probably you won't have time for questions. We'll see about it. About the slides and the materials, I'm publishing everything on my Twitter account. So if you want to check out the material, you can just go into my Twitter. There'll be a link there in a bit. So why am I talking about Angular? I'm a Java dude. I spent a fair amount of time with it. I think the past year or so at Dutch Police. And I started with the early betas until the current version 7, which was released somewhere last week. I enjoyed it. This was actually the first time that I really enjoyed front-end development. And I think it's the ideal front-end framework for Java developers. So how many of you are Java developers? Oh, wow. No surprises there. So what is special about Angular? It forces you to work and think in components and to modularization, which are concepts that we know from the Java world, right? It has dependency injection, which is awesome. It has TypeScript. And TypeScript is, well, I was thinking, how can I describe TypeScript in one sentence? It's like the good parts of JavaScript combined with, well, everything we know and the good stuff from Java. So TypeScript is a language which transpiles to JavaScript. So in the end, you just run JavaScript in your browser. But it has so much more than JavaScript because you have typing, you have inheritance, you have object orientation, you have stuff that's comparable to generics. So for me, it was a fairly natural way of working with, almost working like with Java code. You'll see this in a bit. There's RxJS, which is the JavaScript implementation of reactive extensions. So if you've ever worked with RxJava or maybe the reactive API, that's working out fairly well, and it's a good way to handle all the asynchronous stuff that is going on in applications like calls to a backend, stuff like that. And well, it produces HTML, so you need a template engine, and a template engine has model binding, which means that you can type variables in your TypeScript code, so basically in your business logic, and then bind parts of the HTML to these variables. So whenever something changes in the HTML, because somebody types or something changes in your TypeScript, they are linked and automatically get updated. And that's a big step forward compared to if you're used to working with jQuery, where you need to submit a form, you're typing in the form, then you need to copy all the fields to your AJAX request, send it to the backend, get it back in. In Angular, this is all handled automatically. And there's a powerful CLI, a command line interface that you can use to generate apps, generate part of apps, update your application to the latest version. I really like working with the CLI. So I'm going to plot the Angular world to the Java world a bit. So I'm going to mention a topic, then tell you its counterpart in the Java world, and then what's used in the Angular world for this. So dependency management, we typically do with Maven, right, or Gradle. In Angular, we have npm, which is the node package manager you can use to fetch packages from the internet. To build stuff, we typically also use Maven. Angular uses Webpack, which is a tool that builds your application to kind of like a minified, compressed tarball or zip. So libraries, typically fetched in Maven Central. We have npm js.org, where tons of libraries are that you can get for free. Projects are described in a POM. In Angular, we have the package.json file that basically describes your dependencies and a couple of scripts. So in Java, we program typically in Java. In Angular, it's TypeScript and HTML. Well, TypeScript is optional. You can also do it with JavaScript, but I would advise you to stick with TypeScript. There are a couple of chairs here up front if you'd like to sit, guys. What do we run on? The JVM. In Angular, our platform is either a browser or Node.js. So in a browser, we're running JavaScript. You can also use Node.js, which is a JavaScript engine for the console. What do we use to generate apps? Matt? Yes. In Angular, we have the Angular CLI. Unit testing, JUnit. In Angular, we have Karma and Jasmine, which is a spec framework and a test runner. Well, if you're building web applications with Java, typically you don't bother in struggling with CSS too much. So there's tools like Bootstrap that can help. In the Angular world, obviously you can write the CSS yourself, but I like to stick with front-end frameworks that help me make responsive layouts. So you can either use Bootstrap or Angular Material. Angular Material is an implementation of material design. You can use to easily generate all kinds of components. I'll demo lots of that in a bit. Reactive programming, RxJava and its counterpart RxJS. Testing, end-to-end testing in a browser, typically you use something like Selenium or WebDriver. In Angular we have Protractor, which is like a layer on top of Selenium. So it uses, you can write tests that control your browser to fetch a page, click on buttons and verify the outcome. What do to check our code? Sonar. In Angular you have TSLint, which is a linter for TypeScript, but obviously you can also check your applications in Sonar. So, version control, build automation, artifact repository, metrics. Typical setup is Git, Jenkins, Nexus, Sonar. Make a guess what this is for the JavaScript world and the Angular world. Exactly the same, right? You can also use Git, you can use Jenkins. In the end, it doesn't matter whether you're building a Java application or an Angular application, it's just a shell command you fire off. You can store your jars in Nexus, but you can also store your NPM modules in Nexus. Sonar knows about TypeScript too. So, time to code. As I said, all the code that I'm going to show you is on GitHub. You can go to, if you want to look along, you can go to github.com/Bertjan. And there's a repository called A4JD, Angular for Java developers. There's links there to the slide, to a backend I'm using to connect to, and to all the front-end code. So I'm going to build up the demo in steps. Every step I'm showing is a single commit in this repository. And as a guideline, I'm using the README there. Is this readable in the back? Better? I'm using this README. I'm basically going to follow the steps that are in this README. So first thing to do is grab the Angular CLI. So you need to have npm installed, the Node Package Manager, and you can use this to install the Angular CLI in on your machine and generate a new application. And this will ask you a couple of questions I'm going to show you. So they ask you if you want to add Angular routing, which is the routing module I'm showing later. And it's going to ask you which style sheet form would you like to use. I like to use SCSS. And when you press enter, it will create a bunch of files and then perform an npm install to install all dependencies. I didn't want to keep you waiting with this, so I did it right before the session. To prove it, I did it at 10:03. And then you see that it's first generating the entire code tree and then performing an npm install to install all the dependencies. And I have it running in my IDE here. So let's start by taking a look at the project structure here. So this is what generated. There's an E2E folder, a source folder, and some loose couple of files. So the E2E stands for end-to-end. So this is where your end-to-end tests, your browser-based tests are stored. So we have a config file for Protractor, which is the testing framework. There's a tsconfig file. And tsconfig is our options for the TypeScript compiler. So this is instructing your TypeScript compiler where to output the compiled TypeScript stuff, which types to support. The interesting stuff is in the source folder, where we have a PO file, which is a page object. A page object is a pattern that you can use to kind of wrap all the Selenium selectors in a class that you can use to easily navigate through pages. So what we have here is navigate to, which will perform a browser get on the root of the application. We have a get paragraph text, we will find the element that is in the app root element, and then h1 and get the text of it. And then the end-to-end test itself is saying, all right, create a new page object, navigate to the page, and check that the paragraph text is equal to welcome to demo app. So this is how you write a test in for Angular. You have a describe, that's basically the entire test, and there's then an it that you can read as it should display welcome message, where in the body you put the steps that will execute your test. So then we have node modules. Node modules is where all the dependencies are stored that you fetch from the internet. So this folder can get quite big, and I believe that if you delete this folder, that your laptop will become about 250 grams lighter, because all the electrons that will be removed from your disks. So I'm not going to go in there because there's loads of stuff in there. So in the source folder, we have the app, which is an app component, and here you can see the structure of an Angular component appearing. So we have an HTML file, we have an CSS file, which is like just regular CSS, but can use variables and includes and stuff. There's a spec file, so in the CSS file there's nothing in there. There's a spec file, which is a unit test. There's a component code, there's a module, and there's in this case a routing module that implements the routing for my application. So if we look in the HTML, it's just regular HTML, you got some extra attributes that you can use. In this case, between these double curly brackets is welcome to title. Then title maps to the title that's configured in the companion component. So a component has a annotation that's saying, okay, the selector, so the HTML tag you can use is app root. Template URL is where the template is in there. Here are the styles, and then you can put either your business logic variables inside here. So the spec file is the unit test, so don't get scared by all the stuff that's in here. You need to do some stuff to configure your test, basically saying which modules do you need to include. Then there's a couple of tests. So first one is checking that the app can be created. Then it's expecting the variable of the title to equal demo app, and then it's querying the HTML to select the h1 element and check that it contains welcome to demo app. So even in the unit test, you can still build up entire components and check that the HTML rendering is going on correctly. So you don't need an end-to-end test for that. Then the app component we already went through. This is the app module, and the module is basically the module declaration for this, saying, okay, I'm declaring this component, so this can be used outside this module. I'm importing a couple of modules, and you can set some providers when you need services to be injected, for example. We'll get to the routing later. Angular includes routing that you can easily bind paths in your URL to components in your source tree. So there's assets where you can put stuff in there, like images or your favicon. In environments, there's definitions for what happens in your test environment, what happens in your production environment. For example, debug logging. So with a flag, you can set whether you're building for test or for production. These two are not that interesting. We have the index HTML, which is also, again, plain HTML. So the only Angular-specific thing here is app root, which means render the app component here. So I can dive in there just with the same key bindings I'm navigating through my Java code, and I will switch to the app component. Here's config for Karma, which is a test runner. The main.ts kind of bootstraps the application, and you can see here that if environment production, enable production mode. Polyfills are like little add-ons you can put in your application to enrich older browsers with modern functionality. So for example, if you want to support, I don't know, EA 9, 10, and 11, then you need to enable these polyfills, and then you'll kind of extend their functionality with more modern features, so that as a developer you can program against modern features that are provided by the latest versions of browsers. Here are some overall global styles. This is the configuration for tests, and here we have the TS config again. So this is saying if we buy our application, we shouldn't build or compile all the tests. If we compile the tests, then let's see, we are only including the spec files. TSLint is config for the linter that will enforce that all my components are written kebab case, for example, so with dashes in between. Editor config is something you can use to share settings between IDEs. Git ignore you probably know. Angular.json is kind of like the template file of my project. So this is heavily used by the Angular CLI to add components or to update it. So what it is saying, we were using SCSS for styles. We output the production build in demo app. There's an index HTML, we have some polyfills, configuration. And basically, this is kind of like the blueprint that the Angular CLI uses to update and generate your application. So we'll see later when I'm adding stuff, this file will get updated too. The package.json is where dependencies are in. So you have dependencies, which will be included in your production build, and there are dev dependencies, which you only use on your local machine. Stuff like Protractor, for example, for the end-to-end test. You don't need it in your production build. And there's some scripts that I hardly ever use, because the Angular CLI does everything. Yeah, and then there's some more stuff. There are basically variants of stuff we've seen before. So let's fire up the app and see what it's doing. So all I need to type is ng-serve, and then the CLI will compile the application and start serving it by default on port 4200. So it's doing a full compile initially, and then it does incremental compilation whenever you switch to, whenever you change something. So it's working here. It's a fairly basic app, not too much in there yet. Let me show you the tests. So ng-test will compile all your test sources, run the test, and then start listening for changes in your code base. So even if you change your production code or you change your test code, whenever you change something, the test will run again. So let me show you this. The test is running to our left here. If I can go to the app component and change the name of title, for example. Let's go to title, say demo app 2. Then the test will trigger and run again. And it should now fail, and it's saying, hey, expecting demo app 2 to equal demo app. So it's fairly suitable for test-driven development. I would advise to mainly focus on these Karma unit tests, because the Protractor end-to-end tests take a bit longer to run, because you need to fire up a browser, load the application there. So we can also run the end-to-end tests. So it will default fire up on port 4200, but I'm also already running my application there. So I'm starting it now to listen on 4242. This will build the application, fire up a browser, use the Selenium API to connect to the browser, and then check some stuff while we wait on downloading the driver for Chrome. So while we wait, I go right ahead with showing the linter. So ng-lint will check all my sources that they adhere to my coding standards that are defined. So we're still waiting for Chrome driver to download. Stop downloading torrents for a second, everybody. Oh, we'll see it appear in a bit. I'll just keep it hanging there. So next thing I'm going to do is add Angular material to my application. Angular materials, as I said, the Angular implementation for material design. And this gives you a big set of components that you can use to quickly generate parts of your application. For example, a table or a grid or something. And these are all very well tested, they are performant and they're responsive, so it saves you from a lot of hassle in creating applications that are fast and that are usable on multiple types of devices. So we're still waiting for the web drive to download. Let me give it one more try, otherwise you have to just believe me that this should work in a situation where you have some internet available. So I'm going to add material. And obviously I need internet for that too, so let's just see how this is working out for us. So far so good. So Angular offers something called schematics. And what schematics are is like if you install a module, it has some definitions about extra stuff that should happen. For example, change Angular.json, change the app module. So I've now added Angular material, and that's the end-to-end test. So that was quick, but what it did is fire up the application and verify some stuff using the Protractor API. So now, since Angular 6 or 7, the CLI is also can ask you questions, whether in this case which theme I would like to include. So I'm going for the default Indigo Pink theme. I don't need gesture recognition on my Mac, and I want to set up animations. And now it's going to install a bunch of stuff to add material to my application. So let's see if it's already done something. No, probably this is only Angular. It's Angular material. Yeah, so it added Angular material to my package.json. But once this is done installing, it will also change some of the stuff. For example, the Angular.json file. So I'm going to give this a little time before I switch to my hotspot. Oh, we're almost done, I guess. Yes, there we are. So it's updated a couple of files. They should be in here. So it's updated Angular.json, including the Indigo Pink theme. It's updated the app module, including the browser animations module, which is necessary for material. The index.html got a couple of fonts. And in the package.json, Angular material was added, and some stuff happened in the styles. So probably we should already see a difference here. Because now this font changed to the Roboto font, which is the default font for Angular material. So I'm going to commit this, that we got this out of the way. Git is by default set up, so you can just go ahead and start committing right away. And whenever you're done, you can push it, define the remote repository, and then push it to remote Git repository. So material is in. Next step is generating a navigation component. So you probably want like a menu bar navigation in your application. So you can use the Angular CLI to generate a navigation component. So what did it do? It generated a component with some HTML, some CSS, a test, and a component. So what I need to do now is to add it to my app component, because that's currently the only component that's running here. Let's see. Okay, so let's remove all this. Put in app navigation here. And then because it includes a menu bar that pushes stuff around, I need to move my HTML into the navigation component. So this looks a bit strange right now, but it will be better later when we move all this stuff to another component. So now we should have some navigation in here. Yeah, it's not really working that well yet. Probably the CLI got a bit confused. So what happens sometimes is you start compiling, or you start the CLI, and then we'll incrementally add stuff. But when you can kind of like make a big change, like add material, add navigation, it sometimes can get lost a bit. And then the first thing to try is to restart the ng-CLI and then refresh. And in this case, we've seen that this helps. So I'm not entirely happy yet with how this is looking. So I'm going to tweak some stuff in the navigation. So it also already has like stuff that detects whether I'm on a handset or not. So probably they mean mobile. So if we start moving it around here, then we see there's a cutoff where the menu slides off, and you get a button here to press the menu. But I like this button, so I want it to always be there. So I'm going to override whatever it told me. Let's see. Let's say over, and open is always true. And it's saying this is the button, and the button has a clause saying ng-if is, and then whatever's in here. So you can use this to make conditional HTML elements. So if I remove this part, so that it's no longer conditional, and then the button is, should always be here. So now I can slide in and out. Let's see, open should be false because I don't want it to be open by default. Okay, we now have a menu in here. Let's see. Next thing I'm going to do is to put the part that's now copy pasted in here to like a different to its own component. So let me first commit all the navigation stuff. Now I'm going to generate a home component. And I'm going to move the home stuff in there. Okay, so now there's now like a basic empty home component. Let me show you what's happening in the application side by side. Okay, so I'm going to move everything what's in here. No, let's say only this. Okay, where are we? My mouse is kind of bugging me at the moment. Okay, there we are. And say app home in here. And you immediately see it changing. And now it says home works because that's the default content of the home component. So I go to the home component, replace it what was in there. It's now saying welcome to because this is linked to title, which is no longer here. So we can add it here. And now we're back. So I did show you running the tests in the beginning. I'm not going to focus on tests now anymore because the time doesn't allow. But the application that's in my Git repo has all the working tests, so you can just go there and check it out. So we have now moved the home screen to the home component. Let me get rid of the stuff below here. So I want it to be a bit clean. And next thing we're going to do is add routing to the application. So routing means that you can navigate through your application. But to be able to demo it, I'm going to first generate another component so that we have two menu items to choose from. Okay. So there's like a grid you can generate by using Angular material. They're actually calling it a dashboard. So let's generate that. And now let's edit the dashboard component. So I'm not going to dive into it, but we're going to see it in a bit. So now I want to add routing and change the menu so that you can click through this. So in order to set it up, there's a routing module. And this defines a list of routes. It's over here. So it says routes is empty array. So let's dive into there. And routes actually an array of route. And route has a path and a component. So we can add them here. Path is, well, the root path component is home component. And then add the dashboard. Path is dashboard component, dashboard component. Okay, so the routes are now defined. We're now doubling up because in the navigation we still have the home component, which should be gone here, right? So now only the router outlet is in there, and the router outlet basically says, okay, put in here whatever matches to the current route. So all I need to do now is update the menu, because these are just like plain links here, these link 1, 2, and 3. So I can say, make it a router link, and this instructs the router to switch to the route as defined here. So the empty route is for home. And then we have the dashboard route configured for the dashboard. Okay, we reload it, so now I can switch between dashboard and home. But we need, well, we're going to add some more components anyway. So routing basically enables you to route to different parts of your application on URL level. And all you need to do is define router links and then make sure that the routes are enabled in your routing module. Add dashboard, add routing. So next thing we're going to do is try to do actually something useful with this application. So far it's only been kind of playing around. So I'm going to generate a material table, which is a material implementation for a table, and you get all sorts of stuff like sorting and stuff for free. So let's generate it. So it's added the component stuff and a data source. And data source is basically the backing store you need to connect to a backend. And by default, it only has stub data, so you need to link it to a backend yourself. So let's take a look at it with the target component, and all this is doing is basically setting up a data source. There's some HTML in there, which we'll be going through shortly. So it basically has like a block for every column in the table. Let me show you the table first, that might make some more sense. Add it to routing. This feels a bit double to add it to routing and adding it to the menu. But not every route necessarily needs to be exposed to a menu. Maybe you're linking to something else. So from that point of view, it makes sense. So we have the talks component in the routes. Now we need to add it to the navigation. Okay, now we should be able to go to it. So here we are. So this is like a table with some elements in there. So there are a couple of things that I don't like. The list is a bit long and it's real close to the edges here. So I'm going to update a bunch of stuff to see how this component can be configured. So in the bottom we have the paginator. So you can set the page size. So let's set default to 5. And the options are, I don't know, 5, 10, 15 or something. And it should immediately update. So now we only have 5 options here. And I'd like this table to pop out a bit. So I'm going to add a card. And a card is basically like a block that pops out of it. It is also an Angular material item. So put it in here. That looks a lot better, although I really don't like that this box ends here. So let me just add that in the CSS. The nice thing with CSS is that it's isolated. So whatever I'm typing here regarding mat card will only work inside this component. So it won't influence the CSS of other components. And well, that's for me as a real messy CSS developer, that works very well. So let's set the height to 100%. That's basically how far my CSS skills go. But still, it's working, right? Okay, but this is still connected to stub data, and we wanted to connect it to an actual backend. So let me first commit what we have here. Going to fire up the backend. The backend is a simple Spring Boot 2 application that shows a list of talks for some conference I was once. So this is also in my Git repository. So what do we have? We have a basic Spring Boot application. It has an endpoint that will serve a list of talks using the talk server. So we have get talks there, and what get talks does is basically builds a list of a talk. A talk has an ID, a name, and a list of speakers. So how does this look? Okay, so we have a list of speakers and talks in here. This is actually the schedule for JSpring earlier this year. So now I need to connect my application to this backend. So what do we need to do? Let's first start by generating a service. A service is a concept fairly similar to a service in the Java world that you can use to connect to a backend. So we have a service. And in a service we're defining a method called getTalks. And this will return an observable. So observable is kind of like a future. So it will hold the result of an asynchronous call you do. So calling a backend is an asynchronous call, and it will return an observable of, what do we have? Let's check the data source. We have talks item here, which is a name I don't really like, but let's change this later. So it will return a list of talks item. If you're experienced with RxJava, you can dispute whether this should be an array of talks item or maybe like an observable with a stream of talks, but I'm going to keep it simple. I need to return here well, I first need an HTTP client, so I can inject it using the constructor. As a private HTTP client, and this is the Angular HTTP client. So I probably need to import it. Yeah, so it's the Angular common HTTP client. And I'm going to say this.http.get, and the result, so this is also typed, is an array of talks items. And I'm going to fetch this at HTTP localhost 8080 talks. Okay, so I know that in order to use the HTTP client, I need to add it to my app module. If you don't know this, you will know. If you don't know it, then you will know this anyway, because the application will fail if you don't do this. So I need to import the HTTP client module, so that Angular has the HTTP client. And then let's first fix the data type. So we have the data source here and it's saying talks item, which I don't really like. So it's basically an array of talks, right? So talk. And then this is defined kind of like an inner class here. So let's move this away to a separate file. Talk.ts. Put it in there. Now we need to import it here because it can't find it anymore. Okay. But we're not done here yet because we also have speakers. So let's copy it. And the speaker has only a name, right? Speakers are not numbers. So, and then go to talk and say speakers. There's an array of speaker. Need to import it. And importing also works fairly the same as when you're editing Java code. So now we have a problem here because it's now saying, and to make it short, this means this type doesn't map because the mandatory field speakers is missing. So I can either change this test data or kind of find my way through a bit shorter. I'm going to make it optional. So with a question mark, you're making types optional. So now this does compile. So I'm fairly happy that I can now throw this away because I don't need it anymore. But still, you've learned the optional stuff, right? So now we need, in the connect method, is where it connects to whatever data source you have. So it was using this stub data, which is called this.data. I'm just going to make it empty, and I can drop this too. So instead of, I need to call the backend now. So I can say this.talk service, which I don't have here, so I need to inject it. So let's add private talks service talks service. Okay. So this should be handled by injection from Angular, but in this case it doesn't because the talks data source is created by hand here. So I need to add it here too. This.talk service, and then I can add a constructor here to get it injected by Angular anyway. Talks service. So the only thing you need to do to inject it is add it as a private constructor field. Okay, so let's go back to the data source. So now we should have an instance here of the talk service. So I could say this talk service get talks. And this will provide me with an observable of talk, which is actually what I need here. Talks. Okay. So now I can replace the stub data here with my observable. And there's some things not going right because it's setting the paginator length here based on the data that's like as a synchronous variable in here. While this is a asynchronous thing, so observable talk will be filled with the result of the call to the talk service whenever this is ready. So I'm going to take a shortcut here. Please don't quote me on this, but I'm kind to punch my way through. So I'm saying pipe, where you can pipe more operations to the stream. I need a map operation. I'm going to go from data to need to return the data in the end. And I'm going to break all the reactive rules, but I'm just going to say this.data is data and put this in here. So there's only a shortcut. What you actually should do is make sure that things are processed in a nice asynchronous way. So why are we wrong here? Talk is not assignable to type talk. Probably there's something going wrong with imports here, I guess. Data, talk, that's interesting. Map, data. Okay, let's just see what's going on. Talks, observable talk. That should work, I guess. Let me just see what the compiler is thinking of this, if it agrees. No, but let me give the compiler a hand. Let's just continue here because I think that my IDE is making error about this. We'll see whether this works or not. So the app is, okay, it's saying talks data source is no export member talk. So probably we're fetching it from the wrong part because we replaced it. Yeah, saying here the import isn't working. So let's just get it away. So obviously my idea was smarter than I was, which is fine. And now we have the talks that are being fetched from the backend. So to prove this, if I reload this, then you will see an XHR call where it's getting the talks from the backend. So now we're linked to the Spring backend. All we need to do now is to add the speakers because we also want to see the speakers, right? So if we go to the talks component, we can just add a column of speakers here by copying the name column. Speakers. Speakers. And this is row.speakers. So what are we seeing for speakers now? We have nothing because the speakers are defined dynamically because they're defined in a component so that you can add columns on the fly. So I need to add it here. Then we have who's speaking, nobody. That's interesting. Probably I mistyped something. Talks, where are we? HTML. Row.speakers, it's called. It's already warning me that something was wrong, right? So now we have object speaking, and on this session even object and object are speaking. So that's not, thank you, sorry, that's not right. So let's make this into a list. So what we can do is add a container here. An ng container is like an Angular element that you can use to perform loops and stuff on, but it won't end up in your HTML. So I can say ng4 to make a for loop. Let speaker of row.speakers. And then in here, show speaker.name, because that's what we need to show, right? Again? Wow, thank you. Couldn't do it without you. And there we have the names. So here, okay, these names are still one together, so let's make a quick fix. Don't quote me on this. Otherwise, you would have the problem that we need to join them together, and then when you deal with the commas, you know, you will be in there, right? So we're now connected to the backend. The next step is to generate a production build so that we kind of can minify stuff. So if we do the test build again, you'll see that it will be around somewhat like, I don't know, 8 megabyte or something, I guess. Where are we? Yeah, so it's 6 megabyte or something around 7 megabyte for the test application. So let's build a production version, which will kind of like do some tree shaking, shake out the stuff we don't need, try to minify stuff and put it together in a couple of separate bundles. And I'm going to start up a Docker container with Nginx that's mapped to the directory where the package application is in. So this will be in demo app and in dist, which isn't there yet because it's still building. So this takes a while because it needs to go to tons and tons of JavaScript code to filter only the good parts. And this can typically this will take anywhere between a couple of seconds to maybe a minute or so. Okay, so it's built and it's now in the dist folder. Go to dist demo app. So what do we have here? A main.js polyfills runtime styles. So if I fire up a Docker container here with Nginx, a web server that binds its web root to this folder, and I should have the same thing in here on my localhost port. We see the HTTP request coming on here, and the app should still be working here. So let's see. Oh, it's waiting to load the font from Google, probably. Okay, we're loaded. And the talks are already still working. And the size of this is a 64K. So that's about what you need for Angular, a basic material implementation to get it out the door. I would say it's fairly big, but there's lots of stuff going on for you that you don't need to yourself. So we have 1 minute left, which should be enough, I guess. To summarize, we've seen components, modules not really. When you're making an app a bit bigger, then it's likely to divide it up into modules. These modules can also be lazy loaded. So for example, the talks part won't get loaded until you click the talks menu item. We have dependency injection. TypeScript is awesome, I think. We saw a bit of RxJS, but I kind of cheated there. We saw the template engine a little and the CLI. So we probably won't have time for questions, but if you have questions, I'll be happy to take them right after the talk. Find me outside in the hallway. Reach out on Twitter to me. I'll be here still for a couple of days, so I'll be happy to chat. Everything I showed you is on github.com/bertjan/a4jd. The slides are there, all the code is there, and even the tests work there. Thanks a lot for your time.